Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. All I wanted was peace, a patch of land, and no nosy neighbors. What I got was a suburban war. When the HOA queen from next door crossed my fence with a clipboard and a god complex, she didn't just trespass, she started something she couldn't control, and I don't back down. I never wanted much from life, just a slice of quiet freedom and a bit of land to call my own. That's why, 3 years ago, I bought myself a 15-acre plot on the edge of town. No HOAs, no neighbors with binoculars, no community guidelines printed in fine print on glossy pamphlets. Just me, my tools, my workshop, and a house I built with my own 2 hands. It was heaven. My land was fenced, marked clearly with private property signs, and had 2 gates, one main drive and a smaller side entrance that I barely used. That side entrance led toward the border of Forest Heights, a subdivision with immaculate lawns, identical mailboxes, and people who actually read the HOA newsletter like it was the Constitution. But I didn't mind them. They had their world. I had mine. For the first year, I barely noticed Forest Heights. A few joggers here and there. Occasionally, I'd wave at a dog walker if they didn't pretend I didn't exist. But that was fine. I wasn't looking for barbecues or block parties. I had trees, birds, and the satisfaction of complete independence. My property wasn't part of any development or neighborhood covenant. I made damn sure of that before signing the deed. Then came Karen Lawrence, the newly elected HOA president of Forest Heights, at least according to the banner they strung across their community gate like it was a political campaign. I first heard her name when someone from the neighborhood mentioned a change in leadership. Apparently, the HOA had gone from mildly annoying to full-on authoritarian. And from the moment Karen took over, it was like a cloud settled over my sunny little corner of paradise. At first, I didn't think she'd bother with me. After all, I was outside her kingdom. But when people like Karen get a little power, they start looking for ways to extend it. HOA documents, boundaries, legal jurisdictions, minor details. What mattered to Karen was control. It started small, a couple of cars slowing near my driveway, a man taking photos of my gate from a distance. Then a strange letter from the HOA landed in my mailbox, addressed to the resident adjacent to Forest Heights. No name, no official authority. Just a list of recommendations for how I could improve harmony with the neighborhood aesthetic. I laughed and threw it in the fire pit, but something in my gut told me that wasn't the end of it. Karen hadn't introduced herself. She hadn't come by or made a formal complaint, but even from a distance, I could feel it, like a storm building beyond the tree line. Something told me she wasn't the kind of woman to let a fence stand between her and a target. My paradise had a crack in the foundation, and her name was Karen. It was a Tuesday morning, clear skies, and just warm enough to make a cup of coffee on the porch feel like a ritual. I was halfway through trimming some hedges near the old shed when I noticed movement by the side gate, the one barely anyone used, including me. At first, I figured it was a delivery guy who'd gotten lost, or maybe a curious deer. But then I saw the blonde Bob. She marched in like she was patrolling a military base. Khaki slacks, collared blouse, tablet clutched to her chest like it was some sacred text. Her name tag actually said Karen L. in a sharp sans serif font. Just in case there was any doubt, she didn't knock, didn't call out. She was on my land, casually snapping pictures of my workshop, my roof, even my damn vegetable beds, like she was conducting a code enforcement raid. I stood there for a second in disbelief, then made my way over, heart pounding, not out of fear, but anger. "Excuse me," I said sharply. "What exactly do you think you're doing?" She looked up, surprised for only half a second, then gave a polite smile, the kind that says, "You're already guilty, and I'm just letting you know." "I'm Karen Lawrence, president of the Forest Heights Homeowners Association," she said, as if it were supposed to mean something. "I'm conducting a routine visual inspection. We've noticed some unapproved modifications to nearby properties." "Nearby?" I scoffed. "Lady, you're on my property. You didn't ask. You didn't knock. You walked straight through a gate marked private property." She tilted her head, tone still sickly sweet. "Yes, well, as HOA president, it's my responsibility to maintain the architectural standards of the entire community. We've had concerns about your recent roof replacement and the new fencing materials, neither of which were submitted for review." I stared at her, stunned. "I don't think you understand," I said slowly. This land isn't part of your HOA. I made sure of that before I ever bought it. I'm not under your jurisdiction. Karen's smile evaporated. That may be what you believe, she replied, suddenly firmer. But your proximity to Forest Heights means your actions impact the overall visual environment of our residents. I've already received 3 complaints. You may not technically be under us, but you are still subject to community influence. I stepped forward. Let me make something very clear. This land is mine. I don't answer to you. I don't care about your bylaws or your neighborhood aesthetic. You're trespassing. So, unless you want me to call the sheriff, I suggest you turn around and leave. She took a slow breath, as if trying to compose herself before launching a full Karen offensive. You're being extremely hostile, she said. This isn't how community members should speak to one another. If you have nothing to hide, you should have no problem allowing inspections. I'll be filing an official report. Do whatever you want, I said, already walking back toward the house. But next time you step foot on my land without permission, it's not going to end in conversation. She didn't respond, but I heard the camera click one last time behind me before the gate creaked shut. I watched her march off like a queen wrongly exiled from her kingdom, and I knew. This wasn't over. Karen hadn't just crossed a fence. She had declared war. I didn't sleep much that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I kept seeing Karen's smug face and hearing that hollow click of her tablet camera echo in my ears. The way she walked across my property like she owned the place lit a fire inside me. And when someone like me gets burned, I don't sit around whining. I reinforce my damn fences. By sunrise the next morning, I was already at the hardware store. I bought a new heavy-duty padlock, extra chain links, motion sensor floodlights, and a full set of steel warning signs that made my property line look more like Area 51 than a peaceful home in the countryside. One of them read, "Private property. Trespassers will be prosecuted. HOA not recognized here." Just for fun, I added a second one under it. "Smile, you're on camera, and I prosecute in 4K. By noon, I'd installed a new latch mechanism on the side gate with a commercial-grade combination lock. I mounted cameras covering all possible angles, one facing the gate, one watching the shed, and another directly aimed at the workshop. I even put up solar-powered motion lights that blasted brighter than a prison yard at midnight. The place looked like Fort Knox had a baby with a survivalist compound. And honestly, it felt good. I wasn't hiding anything. I just didn't want strangers stomping around my land and pretending they had a say in it. I wanted to make a statement, one Karen couldn't ignore, and, oh boy, did she not disappoint. 2 days later, around 4 p.m., I was welding a hinge inside my shop when I heard a ruckus outside. Not the usual rustle of wind or squirrels. Voices, angry ones. I stepped out, and what I saw nearly made me laugh out loud. There she was. Karen, flanked by 2 self-appointed minions. One looked like he was auditioning to be her personal security guard. The other clutched a clipboard like it was a badge of honor. They stood just outside the newly reinforced gate, and Karen was shaking the lock with both hands, her face red with frustration. "This is unacceptable. This lock is a threat to community safety," she shouted, drawing stares from nearby Forest Heights residents who'd come out of their pastel homes to see what the fuss was about. I leaned on the fence and raised an eyebrow. "You gonna break that? Or should I grab you some bolt cutters so we can all go to jail together?" Her eyes darted to me like I'd just insulted her bloodline. "Mr. Connor, this is not over. You are creating a hostile perimeter that endangers children, limits community access, and gives the impression of criminal activity." "Criminal activity," I laughed. "You mean my tool shed and tomato garden?" "I've had multiple complaints, sir," she snapped, voice climbing to theatrical heights. "We've been informed you're hiding unlicensed construction, and the HOA has a right to verify that." "You have no right," I cut in. "This isn't your sandbox, and I'm not one of your toy soldiers. Take your Clipboard brigade and find another fence to scream at." That's when she took out her phone and started recording me. "Oh, don't worry," I said, pointing to my own camera mounted on a post. "I'm already recording you back. Want to go live together? Maybe start a reality show? Karen, Queen of Trespass?" But that only made her angrier. She turned to the crowd of neighbors now gathering nearby, gesturing wildly like a street performer in the middle of a meltdown. "This man is a danger to our community. He has barricaded land that affects our property values. We demand access." The bodyguard-looking guy actually started rattling the fence again. Hard. I stepped forward, calm but unblinking. "That's your final warning. This is private land. You break that lock and I press charges. That's not a threat. That's a guarantee." Karen's voice cracked as she yelled, "We'll see what the police have to say about that." I grinned. Can't wait. Not 15 minutes after Karen's performance at my gate, I saw flashing blue lights crawling up the gravel road like an omen. One sheriff's cruiser, then another. She really went all in. I stood there waiting, arms crossed, still wearing my welding apron, probably looking more like a grizzled villain than I intended. But I wasn't worried. I knew the law was on my side. Karen lit up when the deputies stepped out, practically speed-walking to intercept them. "Officers, thank God you're here. This man is obstructing a shared access point. He's building unpermitted structures and has been verbally aggressive toward community members." One of the deputies, a tall guy named Reynolds, who I actually recognized from the local hardware store, held up a hand. "Ma'am, slow down. Let's take this one step at a time." I walked up calmly, nodded at Reynolds. "Afternoon, officer. Want to see proof of ownership?" He looked from me to Karen and back again. "That'd be great." I led him to my truck and pulled out a folder. Land deed, survey maps, zoning records, the whole legal buffet. My property line ends 40 feet from the nearest Forest Heights lot. I'm not under any HOA jurisdiction, never have been. This land predates the subdivision by 20 years. Reynolds flipped through the papers, nodding slowly. "Looks clean. And the gate? Fully within my boundary. Installed it myself. She trespassed 2 days ago. Caught on camera." Karen, standing behind him, let out a dramatic scoff. "It doesn't matter if it's technically outside the HOA. His structures, those sheds and tools and whatever else, are visible from our streets. He's creating an eyesore and refuses compliance." The other deputy, a shorter guy with a coffee cup permanently glued to his hand, raised a brow. "Ma'am, visibility doesn't equal jurisdiction. If he's not under your HOA, you don't have legal authority here." Karen's jaw dropped. "So you're saying he can do whatever he wants? He can bring down our property values, put up barricades like a madman, and we're supposed to just let him? Unless he's breaking municipal law," Reynolds said, handing me back my documents. "There's not much we can do. And from what I'm seeing, he's well within his rights." I couldn't resist. I leaned in slightly toward Karen and said with a calm, almost cheerful voice, "You might want to invest in a new pair of binoculars, Karen. This view's going to be here for a long time." Her face flushed. "This is not over. I'll be contacting the HOA's legal team." The deputy sighed. "Ma'am, if you continue to trespass, you'll be the one facing charges. I strongly suggest you stay on your side of the fence." And just like that, they were gone. Karen stomped off to her SUV like a furious peacock, while her clipboard-wielding lackey whispered something that sounded like a threat about escalation. I didn't catch it all, but I didn't need to. Later that evening, I sat on my porch with a cold beer, watching the sunset bleed over the pines, thinking maybe, just maybe, that was the end of it. But deep down, I knew better. People like Karen don't back off. They regroup. And they come back louder. It happened on a Sunday afternoon. Peaceful, quiet, one of those warm days that feels like the earth itself is letting out a sigh. I'd just gotten back from town with some lumber and a fresh bag of dog food. As I pulled into the main drive, I noticed something strange. The side gate was wide open. That gate had a reinforced lock. I'd checked it that morning. My gut sank like a rock in a still pond. I killed the engine and got out slowly, heart thumping as I heard voices, loud ones coming from beyond the workshop. Not casual neighbor chatter, not kids playing. These were deliberate, assertive, like someone giving instructions. I crept around the back path and froze when I saw them, Karen, in the middle of my property. Not just her either. She'd brought 3 accomplices this time. 2 men, 1 woman, all dressed like off-duty security guards, complete with radios and utility vests. One was prying open the side of my workshop with a crowbar. The other was rifling through my tool chest like he owned it. Karen stood in the center, arms folded, barking orders like a general. "I want photographs of everything, labeling, wiring, all of it. This entire setup is in violation of code, and once we log it, the HOA will act." I stepped out into view. "You're out of your damn mind." They all turned. Karen's face flickered with something between panic and defiance, but she didn't back down. "You've had your warnings, Mr. Connor," she called. "This is now an emergency inspection authorized by the HOA enforcement clause." "You don't have jurisdiction," I roared, walking toward them. "You broke my lock, entered my property, and you're destroying my workshop. You're criminals." One of the men moved between me and Karen as if playing bodyguard. "You need to step back. You need to get off my land," I growled, reaching for my phone. "Right now." I hit 911. As I was giving dispatch my address, the second guy, the one still messing with my tools, knocked over an entire rack of precision parts, scattering them across the concrete. That was it. I stuffed the phone in my pocket and charged. I don't remember all the details. Adrenaline does strange things. But I know I threw the first shove. He swung back with a wrench, missed. I tackled him to the ground hard enough to knock the wind out of both of us. He squirmed, landed a punch on my ribs, but I elbowed him off and rolled on top, pinning his arm behind his back. "Try stealing something now," I spat, rage pouring from every pore. Suddenly, the second guy grabbed me from behind, yanking me backward. We all stumbled, and for a moment, it was chaos. Karen screaming, her assistant yelling, me fighting off two guys at once. We crashed into a stack of lumber I'd been prepping. Boards scattered, someone tripped, and then sirens. Red and blue lights reflected across my front windows as 3 cruisers tore up the drive. Tires screeched. Doors flew open. Down on the ground. Hands where I can see 'em. I froze. The others hesitated a beat too long. The deputies didn't care who started it. We were all cuffed, stuffed into the backs of squad cars, and hauled into holding for interview and identification. At the station, once I showed them my ID, deed, footage from the cameras, and explained the situation, it didn't take long for them to release me. One of the deputies even apologized, saying, "It's clear you were defending yourself and your property." But the damage was already done. By the time I got home, my workshop was a mess. My ribs ached like hell. And the worst part, Karen had already struck online. She'd posted on her neighborhood Facebook group, "Forest Heights residents beware. Neighbor involved in violent altercation. Police detained multiple parties. Background checks recommended." She didn't name me. She didn't have to. The rumor mill did the rest. The next morning, I found a flyer in my mailbox with bold red letters. "Who is your neighbor really?" Karen hadn't just trespassed and vandalized. She'd declared character assassination. She thought she could spin the narrative, turn my defense into aggression, my property into crime scene, and me into a villain. She had no idea what she'd just ignited. There's a special kind of silence in a courtroom, the kind that feels like it's holding its breath. I stood there in a suit I hadn't worn since my cousin's wedding, palms steady, eyes locked on the woman across the aisle. Karen Lawrence sat stiffly next to her attorney, lips pursed so tight they could crack granite. Gone was the suburban monarch with her clipboard and sunglasses. This version of Karen looked cornered, hollow, like someone who knew the walls were finally closing in. My ribs were still bruised. My workshop still smelled like spilled oil and broken pride. And my name had been dragged through every Facebook post, Nextdoor thread, and local whisper Karen could manipulate. But here, in this courtroom, the truth had weight. And today, it was on my side. My lawyer, a bulldog named Ellis, stood and began, "Your Honor, we are here today because the plaintiff's property rights were not only violated, but trampled, physically, legally, and publicly. What started as a petty overreach by an HOA president escalated into coordinated trespassing, destruction of private property, assault, and defamation." Karen's lawyer jumped up with the kind of limp rebuttal you expect from someone trying to hold a sinking ship together with chewing gum. He claimed Karen was acting in the interest of the community, that her team had interpreted access boundaries incorrectly, and that the confrontation was regrettable but avoidable. Avoidable? My blood boiled. Then came my turn. I stepped up to the witness stand, eyes sweeping the courtroom. The judge nodded at me. I cleared my throat. "I'm not a man who likes drama," I said, voice steady. "I moved out to my land for peace, to build, to live simply, and to be left alone. I didn't ask to be targeted. I didn't invite that woman to walk onto my land with a tablet like she was Caesar claiming territory. But she did. And when I told her no, firmly, legally, she came back with a team, broke into my shop, destroyed my tools, and tried to paint me as the criminal. I turned toward the jury. I've got broken equipment, broken ribs, and a reputation in my town that took a hit because this woman couldn't stand the idea that someone wasn't under her thumb. She acted like a queen, but this isn't a kingdom. It's America. And where I come from, you don't mess with a man's land." I stepped down to silence. Even the judge seemed to take a beat before continuing. Then came the evidence. Camera footage of the break-in, photos of my destroyed equipment, a printed copy of Karen's online posts, and even screenshots of the internal HOA chat where she referred to me as a problem that needs removal. Her cronies didn't help. One pled the fifth. The other admitted on the stand that Karen told us it would be covered by HOA authority. When the verdict finally came, the courtroom felt like it was vibrating. We find in favor of the plaintiff, Mr. Matthew Connor, starring in the court orders restitution of $375,000 in damages, $150,000 for destruction of property, $75,000 for medical expenses and trauma, $100,000 for defamation and reputational harm, and $50,000 in punitive damages for willful trespass and abuse of power. But it didn't stop there. Karen was issued a restraining order. She couldn't come within 200 yards of my property. She was stripped of her HOA presidency, effective immediately. The HOA board itself was placed under temporary court oversight for systemic negligence, and her two accomplices, charged with trespassing and vandalism, with one getting 6 months probation and mandatory community service. Ironic, considering he'd be mowing public lawns for the next 6 weekends. I looked at Karen as the gavel hit wood. Her hands trembled, her stare empty, all her righteous fury gone, all her superiority crumbled. She didn't look powerful anymore. She looked small. I wanted to be angry. I wanted to gloat. But standing there, free, vindicated, I just felt one thing: done. I turned, nodded to the judge, and walked out of that courtroom a free man with clean hands, a clean name, and a message loud enough to shake every HOA in the county. You don't get to rewrite property lines. Not with bylaws. Not with bullying. Not with lies. It's funny how quickly peace can return once the noise dies down. A few weeks after the court verdict, my land felt like mine again. Not just on paper, but in the bones of it. The wind sounded cleaner. The tools felt lighter in my hands. And even the birds seemed to sing with less tension. Maybe it was just me. Maybe I was finally breathing again. The repairs to my workshop were finished. Cameras were upgraded, gates refortified, and a brand new security system now pings my phone every time a squirrel blinks in the wrong direction. Overkill? Maybe, but try getting tackled in your own backyard and see how casual you get. I also added something new, a large metal sign bolted right into the front gate. It reads, "Private property, not HOA land. Trespass and you'll meet my lawyer before you meet me." And just below it, a smaller plaque for flavor. Karen tested, court approved. But the real cherry on top, that came in the form of a barbecue. One Saturday, I decided to throw a proper bash. Nothing too fancy, just beer, ribs, a couple of fire pits, and a custom cake shaped like a tiny fence. I called it the No Trespassing Fiesta. Word spread fast, and by sunset, more than 50 people had shown up, some from Forest Heights, others from nearby homes I didn't even know existed. Turns out, I wasn't the only one Karen had tried to push around. Neighbors came up to me all evening. Man, I wish I stood up to her sooner. Did she really tell the HOA I couldn't paint my shutters navy blue? I still get passive-aggressive emails about my lawn gnomes. There was laughter, music, and more. Then a few toasts in my direction. Someone even brought a piñata shaped like a clipboard. When we cracked it open, instead of candy, it was full of fake citations and tiny plastic gavels. I nearly choked from laughing. But the best moment? That came near the end, when one of Karen's old board members sheepishly approached me with a plate of potato salad and said, "You know, you kinda set us free, man." I didn't say anything, just nodded and clinked my beer bottle against his. Sometimes justice comes in a courtroom, and sometimes it comes with barbecue sauce, a bonfire, and a sign that makes everyone smile as they drive by.